This is Boomer Time, a proactive podcast for baby boomers, about baby boomers, and for people taking care of baby boomers. If that sounds like you, then you're in the right place. I'm Nancy Cogar, an elder law attorney and aging advocate, and this podcast was made just for you. Remember, though, the things we discuss here are not intended to be legal advice, and no attorney-client relationship is established by this podcast. Good afternoon. I hope this finds you well, and I'm so glad that you've joined me here on Boomer Time. I'm your host, Nancy Cogar, and if you've been following us, then you know we've already tackled the topics of wills and powers of attorney. But if you're just joining us for the first time, then please know, first of all, we are so glad to have you here. And those past episodes of Boomer Time are always available on our library. That's also on my website, nancycogar.com. So you can go back and listen to all of those. There are also lots of good resources connected with those episodes as well. Well, today, though, we're talking about trusts. There are lots of different kinds of trusts, and they can serve all kinds of different purposes. So this is an often confusing topic for that very reason. I hope to resolve some of that today as we tackle some of the differences in trusts and talk about whether a trust is a good option for you, whether it comes to long-term planning for an adult or someone with a special need, or just a vehicle that you want to avoid probate. Probate, of course, is the court-administered estate administration, and that usually involves a will. So you can even have trusts and wills, believe it or not. I told you, this is confusing stuff, and we're going to talk about that later too. So first, get us started. What is a trust, and how does it work? Trusts are generally created under the law where you live, so it's statutory. Tennessee has a uniform trust code that governs such trusts, which is part of our state laws. Other states have similar laws in place, and those can vary from state to state, and you need to be very aware of that. So if you have a trust that's created in Tennessee and you move to Georgia, well, unless you change the controlling law of that trust, it's going to continue to be controlled by Tennessee law. It works the other way around too. So if you're one of those folks that have moved here to Tennessee recently and you had a trust created in another state, your trust will continue to be governed by that state's rules unless you amend the trust. So that's something you want to think carefully about because that can get extremely complicated, especially if it involves a complex trust. And I may tackle the details of more complicated trusts in future episodes, but today we are just talking about trust generally. I think that's enough for one episode, okay? So, there are all kinds of trusts. There are revocable trusts, and just like it sounds, you can revoke it. However, there may be limits as to how long you can do that. And if you die, your survivors may be limited or even unable to revoke it. So there are also irrevocable trusts, and those can't be revoked except for a few exceptions that definitely require a lawyer, but I'm not touching on any of those today. For the most part, an irrevocable trust, I want you to think of it this way. It's like a locked box. So if you put your assets in it, there should be no expectation of taking them out in your lifetime. There are also special needs trusts, which are designed to meet special needs like disabilities and long-term care. There are marital trusts. Those are designed to help with the passage of large estates between spouses. There are also trusts known as asset protection trusts or Medicaid asset protection trusts. And the primary planning purpose of those is to manage your assets in the event you find yourself in a nursing home. Those are irrevocable, meaning essentially when you establish the trust, you must transfer control of your assets away to someone else who's acting as trustee, and that's forever. So that's not very attractive to a lot of folks, and I understand that. I'm of the opinion, too, that there are a lot of better options for you rather than planning to be in a nursing home. If you can avoid that and have another strategy, I always think that's a better way to preserve your quality of life. That's just my opinion, of course. And sometimes we're not able to do that, unfortunately. But if we can, that is always something I think is worth taking a good look at as part of planning, especially as we baby boomers age out. The pressure on institutionalized care, including nursing home care, is expected to get more and more intense as the years go on. So I've made it a plan to be more practical for you to stay at home with the support you need if we can do that. But I say that, don't cross trusts off the list if you're not a millionaire with lots of assets, okay? Because it may still be a good option for you. And that's where I am going to focus today's discussion. Because, honestly, that's where most of us find ourselves, right? I think that's the most practical part for our discussion on trusts. And it's where I find most of my clients making decisions in favor of trusts. Either those are separately created trusts, or, get this, trusts that are created inside last will and testaments. Are you confused yet? I hope not. We're going to tackle that topic next, and I hope to give you a better handle on these simpler trusts and what they may be able to do to help you as you plan for your future. So we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back to talk about that. Stick with me. Thanks for sticking with me here on Boomer Time as we tackle trusts. So, for the purposes of our discussion today, and as I mentioned before the break, I want to focus on two types of trusts. One, revocable trusts, and two, testamentary trusts. In my opinion, and you could probably ask 10 lawyers for their opinion and it would all be different, but in my opinion, these are some of the most practical types of trusts, and usually the ones I see my clients opting for after considering a wide range of options. We touched on some of that before the break, and I promise we will tackle some of those more complicated trusts in the future episodes, but I don't want to get you confused here. So, what are revocable trusts and testamentary trusts? And why would you use them? Hey, well, I'm glad you asked. And I'm going to tell you why. So first, revocable trusts. We've already talked about those some, and the fact that they can be created and terminated. And you can put your assets in these trusts and pull them out. And you, as the creator of the trust, or the grantor, as you would be known, of the trust, are also the trustee, or the one in charge of managing the trust and the assets that are inside or titled in the trust. So these revocable trusts are sometimes also known as revocable living trusts, or you may even see inter vivos trusts, which is just a fancy way of saying living trusts because they help you manage your assets while you're alive and help with direct and special kinds of management and distribution when you die. So in other words, you are the creator and are able to maintain control over your assets even after you pass away with a trust. These offer a lot of really great options, and they don't have to be complicated. I see those big fat books that sometimes estate planners will give folks, and you know, that's fine for some people, but that's not necessarily what you need. I'm talking about a revocable trust. It can be a simple trust. It's created by a trust agreement, okay? And that's a type of contract that you enter into as creator or grantor. So in the agreement, you decide how you want your assets to be held in the trust and how you want them managed for your benefit while you're alive. In that same agreement, it has a second part to it as well and provides for what happens to your assets after you die. So all in that one document, you get to decide what you want to do with your assets while you're alive and then after you die, and all without the court intervening, as this is meant to be an agreement outside of the control of probate administration. That's also a great benefit that you want to consider. Avoiding probate. In doing that, you will avoid exposing your estate to your creditors in probate. So for that reason, you protect those inheritances as to what you want to happen with those assets after you're done using them and you die. You can also plan in a revocable trust for your care, your long-term care, in the event you become incapacitated in the future. Remember I talked about options other than nursing homes? Well, if you have the time, this is a wonderful opportunity to plan for that future care at home and how you'd pay for that support. Maybe you have a child that's agreed in advance to be your caregiver. Well, you can provide for how that care will be done and also make arrangements to pay that child for the time they put in to care for you at that time. So that's cool because remember we talked about irrevocable trusts where you need to transfer away all of the control from you. Well, these revocable trusts don't do that. You are the creator, as I've said, and you are the trustee over the trust. So you manage the day-to-day operations of the trust. It's also identified by your Social Security number. So guess what? That means you don't have to file a separate tax return for your trust. And if you have the time for long-term planning, a revocable trust can basically achieve, in my opinion, the same results of an irrevocable trust because your assets will pass directly to the beneficiaries of your trust without having to wait through probate administration. It's all done away from the grasp of your creditors. Incidentally, probate is the only place Tennessee's Medicaid program, TennCare, can collect against benefits that they may have provided to you or your spouse, typically through nursing home care. This is their limited opportunity here in Tennessee. Well, that's not so in other states, but some states have more expanded recovery options. Remember, I talked about the importance of controlling state law? Well, here's an example of that. I really like these revocable trusts for all these reasons. So if you've got time for planning, I think they're really worth consideration. Okay, well, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, I'm going to tackle our second topic on the docket today, testamentary trusts. I'll be right back. Welcome back to Boomer Time, and I'm your host, Nancy Cogar, and today we are talking about trusts. Before I forget, if you like this podcast, then I really want to encourage you to visit my website, nancycogar.com. There you will find more episodes of Boomer Time and also plenty of resources that I think will be very helpful to you for a variety of reasons. I like resources, and I want to make those available to you. So, in addition to our discussion here today, I am going to have a document that I drafted a while back before on trusts available to you on my website, okay? It's called My Primer on Trusts. And if you want more information on some of the things we've talked about here, then check it out. I think you'll find it helpful. You can also, of course, reach out to me on the website. Let me know your thoughts about the podcast. And maybe there's a question that you have about trusts or any other topic related to aging. Just let me know. I love hearing from you, and it could make a really good topic for a future show. So, one other thing before we get back to our topic. I want to ask you, please support the podcast. I'm doing this because I care about you, and I want to get the word out more so that people are better prepared for these issues that come up with aging. So I'm hoping to spread the word about boomer time so that others are able to be helped by it. So if you like the podcast, I would ask you to please follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and maybe share it with a friend. I'd really appreciate that. Okay, well, back to trusts, okay? So before the break, we were talking about revocable trusts. And I also want to touch on something known as testamentary trusts. Say that 10 times fast, huh? What are those? Well, those are trusts that are created inside your last will and testament. So wills are not effective until you die. For the same reason, a testamentary trust is not effective until that same time. So maybe you don't need a trust now, but your heirs may benefit from a testamentary trust for any of the following reasons. Maybe your heirs are minors or grandchildren that are young. Did you know that minors can't receive inheritances? Well, I wouldn't have known that if I didn't do what I did. But that's one reason you might need a testamentary trust. If a minor is set to receive a bequest from your will, then the testamentary trust will allow for somewhere for that inheritance to go and be protected and managed for the minor until they reach a certain age. Plus, the trustee of that testamentary trust can make distributions for that minor's benefit until they become an adult. So that's a really good option for a lot of folks. Here's another reason why testamentary trusts might be a good option for you. Maybe you have a family member that, is not so good with money, and maybe they've got creditors. Maybe they owe a lot of people money, okay? You don't want that inheritance to be gobbled up by those creditors, do you? I don't think so. Well, you can give such a bequest in trust to that person, and those monies can be managed by the trustee for that individual's benefit rather than going directly to the heir and then subsequently to his or her creditors. That's a good option, especially since it's your money, right? Here's another scenario where testamentary trusts come in handy. Say you have a beneficiary who has a disability. Well, you don't want to interfere with their benefits by giving them a big inheritance. You're going to knock them off their benefits and they're going to become ineligible. But maybe you want to offer some help with other items that aren't covered by those benefits. A testamentary trust can help with that. It can also provide for care for a surviving spouse after the first spouse dies. Maybe there's a plan for them to receive income and reserve the remaining assets for the grandkids. You can see there's a lot of good options with these trusts that are contained inside your wills. It's important to note, though, that if you have a will as the vehicle for your estate, remember you are going to need to have your will administered in probate. Okay? Remember that. This is important. This is not a way to avoid probate, but it is a good way to protect sensitive bequests. Okay? So that's revocable trusts and testamentary trusts. And like I mentioned, there are lots of other kinds of trusts out there designed to do all kinds of things, and some are more complicated than others. But this is designed to be an introduction to these two types of trusts. Boy, a lot of T's today, huh? I'm sure this has generated some questions. So if it has, remember, you can reach out to me at nancycogar.com. Okay? Well, I want to finish our time today with a word of encouragement. I've shared many, many times that I'm a person of faith, right? And I believe that it's important to share some encouragement along the way. So here's my little dose of encouragement for the day. Estate planning is important, okay? Take the time to get it done. If you don't, then, honestly, you're leaving your family and your belongings in the hands of the government. Okay, that's what happens if you don't provide valid instructions for what you want to happen to your stuff after you die. The state figures it out, okay? Don't do that. Just don't do that. Let's take a look at what we've tackled to date, okay? I think there's some good juicy little tidbits in here and they're worth looking back at. So if you've got some time, here's what you can listen to. Of course, I started with episode 0, as they call them in podcast land. And that's just kind of an introduction to me, who I am, and why I'm doing this. I think it's important to know why someone's doing something. So if you're curious about that, you can start right at the beginning and check that out. In episode 1, I talk about meeting the sandwich generation. And what does that mean? That means all these adult children that are now becoming caregivers, you're being called the sandwich generation. And that's because you're raising your own kids and now you're finding yourself taking care of your parents. So you're sandwiched. And it's not easy, but we talk about that and offer some counsel and advice as to what you can do if you find yourself in that situation. Episode 2, we talk about 10 foundational steps for caregivers. That is not an easy task, so there's some really good foundational steps to consider there. How do you get started with caregiving? What do you need to think about before you start doing that? It's not an easy decision. Speaking of which, in episode 3, I had my husband Gary on, and we've been in that circumstance before. And it's important to think about protecting your marriage while caregiving. Before you agree to bring your parents into your house, you want to talk about what you need to do to protect your marriage, because that can be extremely stressful. So, episode 4, I had my personal trainer, Kareem Brown, here for the first time. He is a wonderful guy, and he works on trying to strengthen your muscles related to balance and your core, and strengthen your legs so that you can stay at home, get up and down steps, chairs, all that kind of stuff. That is crucial when you're aging. So you can listen to that and hear what he has to say and even reach out to him if you want. That was one of our most popular episodes so far. And he's a great guy. He tortures me on a regular basis, but I don't mind. In episode 5, we talk about responding to holiday red flags. This is because we all travel during the holidays there, off and on. And You go home and you may notice some things that concern you when it comes to your parents. That's what that one's all about. What do you do? What do you do if you see these things? How can you respond? How can you start to put a plan in place to protect your parents? Also talked about legacy building with my friend and my mentor, Lerone Coach Jennings, who is a fixture here in Chattanooga. And he is just such a wonderful man. He has trained many athletes over the years, and he has also been such a wonderful leader and mentor to young people in this area. So he's a pastor, and he cares about legacy building. And I think he's a wonderful example of a powerful legacy. Might want to check out my episode on do-it-yourself wills. Do-it-yourself wills can lead to disaster. I've got 10 reasons why. I would listen to that one if I were you. And we followed that up with an episode on conservatorships with my partner and my friend Jody Schaefer. We talked about the conservative. What am I trying to say? We talked about conservatorships. That's what I'm trying to say. There are just so many scams out there. They are up almost 85% just from last year. And they target the elderly. So I had not one, but 2 episodes on scams, both what scams are out there and then how can you protect yourself from them. I've got an episode on powers of attorney. These are essential. Don't think you don't need them. You do. You can really be SOL without a POA. So there's just a few of the episodes that we have in the can, as they say in broadcasting. And I think they're worth checking out. And there's much more to come. All right. So here's some encouragement about planning, more specifically estate planning, and some wise words from a few folks that I did some research, and I thought these were worth contemplating on, and I like to meditate on things sometimes. So let me know what you think of these, okay? Here's one. Always plan ahead. It wasn't raining when Noah built his ark. That's true. That's Richard Cushing. Here's one. If you do not have a will or a plan for your estate, then guess what? The government has one for you. Right? I talked about that. That's never good. Do something today that your future self will thank you for. That's pretty good. I try to think about that sometimes. What would future Nancy want? Okay? Be your friend. Do something to benefit yourself and protect yourself. You can thank yourself for it later. And we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. I like that one. That's Winston Churchill. He was a wise man. Do something today that your future self will thank you for. That's just the same one from before, but it's worth repeating, right? Yeah. Just do something that your future self will thank you for. If you don't, who's going to, right? Benjamin Franklin said, by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. That's true, right? Prepare so you don't fail. And here's one from me, okay? If it's not in writing, it's not enforceable. Trust me, if somebody promises you something in their estate and they don't write it down, you ain't getting it. Write it down in a will that's valid and enforceable or a trust. Okay? So, I hope you found today beneficial. I did. I enjoy sharing this information. You probably can't tell, huh? But stick with us. And like I said, we are going to work through these things one item at a time. And if you have something specific that you have a question about, reach out, like I said. So I just wish a wonderful week for you, and that this discussion has helped you in some way, so that you've got a little jump in your step and you have some resources that can help you tackle the things that you have before you in the week. And I will be here again next week. And I want to be here the week after that, okay? We're going to walk this together. This is tough stuff, so I want to walk it together. Thank you for listening to podcast today, Boomer Time. And I hope you will stick with us. This is Nancy Cogar, and I am saying so long for now. I'll see you next time.